the stories we tell ourselves, rewriting your inner narrative for authentic success. Have you ever noticed that voice in your head, the one that whispers, you're not ready, right before you raise your hand in a meeting? Or maybe it screams, who do you think you are? When you're about to apply for that promotion, that voice isn't just background noise, it's the architect of your reality. I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Sharon Robustelli, whose groundbreaking work on internal narratives has transformed how we understand success, particularly for Black professionals navigating predominantly white spaces. Sharon isn't just another leadership consultant. She's a revolutionary thinker whose research has literally saved careers and, in some cases, lives. Her ability to identify the invisible scripts holding brilliant people back has earned her recognition across industries. And her compassionate approach to dismantling these barriers makes her work uniquely powerful. Most people, Sharon told me, don't realize they're walking around with invisible scripts running their decisions, their confidence, their entire careers, scripts they didn't even write themselves. Think about that for a moment. The most powerful force shaping your professional trajectory isn't your resume, your network, or even your skills. It's the narrative playing on repeat between your ears. And here's what makes Sharon's work so revolutionary. She's proven that when we consciously rewrite those narratives, everything changes. Not just how we feel, but what we achieve. This isn't fluffy self help talk. This is science. This is strategy. This is survival for many of us. Let me share what I learned from Sharon about three transformative truths that can revolutionize how you show up in your career and your life. First, your internal narrative shapes your reality in ways more powerful than most of us realize. The stories you tell yourself about your worth, your abilities, your potential directly influence your confidence, your decisions, and ultimately your achievements. Second, challenging those limiting beliefs isn't just helpful, it's essential for growth. Transforming self doubt into self belief requires conscious effort to identify and reframe the negative inner dialogues that have been holding you back. And third, developing self awareness and emotional agility gives you tools for genuine empowerment. When you can recognize when your internal story is running the show, you gain the ability to pause, choose a new response, and step into authentic leadership. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. That sounds nice, but my challenges are real. The barriers I face aren't just in my head. And you're absolutely right. Systemic obstacles exist. Discrimination is real. Bias is real. But here's what Sharon's research reveals. While we can control all external circumstances, we can transform how we respond to them. And that response begins with the story we're telling ourselves. Let me share a powerful example from Sharon's work that illustrates this principle in action. Hunming Kwang, a renowned coach working with Black entrepreneurs, documented how shifting internal narratives directly translated to external success. Many of his clients arrived with deeply ingrained beliefs that they were not ready or not enough, beliefs born from years of professional rejection or systemic bias. One founder in particular had grown up being repeatedly told by teachers that she would never lead. That message became an unconscious barrier that limited her for decades until she finally confronted it during coaching sessions. Through structured inner work and guided introspection exercises, she and other entrepreneurs in the program learned to identify these limiting stories and consciously replace them with empowering narratives rooted in their true strengths. The results? Remarkable. Participants reported dramatic increases in self confidence. Several launched new ventures or stepped into visible leadership roles within just 6 months. Multiple cohort members secured significant investments after reframing their narratives during pitch presentations. Milestones they had previously believed were out of reach due to imposter syndrome. This approach has now influenced dozens of Black founders across industries who serve as mentors, amplifying similar mindset shifts in their communities. What's particularly striking about this example is how it demonstrates that changing your internal narrative isn't just about feeling better, though that matters enormously. It's about tangible outcomes, real money, real opportunities, real impact. But let's be honest, recognizing and rewriting these narratives isn't always straightforward, especially when they've been reinforced by external messages throughout our lives. This brings me to another powerful example Sharon shared during our conversation. Harvard Business Publishing profiled leaders who developed what they call emotional agility, learning how not to get hooked by old stories about themselves during high stakes moments. One mid level manager at a Fortune 50 company struggled with feeling invisible among senior executives. She often silenced herself in meetings because her inner story insisted her ideas weren't valuable enough to share. Through dedicated practice, she learned to pause before reacting emotionally to these triggers. She examined where those feelings originated, tracing them back to childhood dynamics where voicing opinions was discouraged. Then, crucially, she began choosing responses aligned with her values instead of her fears. The transformation wasn't overnight, but it was profound. Over time, she began speaking up consistently. Her innovative suggestions led directly to two major project wins that were recognized at company wide meetings. Within a year, she was promoted and now coaches other women of color on using emotional agility techniques for career advancement. Her individual transformation even inspired cultural shifts toward greater psychological safety on her team. What's particularly powerful about this example is how it illustrates that our internal narratives often have deep roots. They're not just random thoughts, they're patterns established early in our lives, sometimes before we even had language to describe them. As Sharon emphasized in our interview, these stories aren't your fault, but they are your responsibility. And sometimes those stories are particularly tenacious because they're rooted in genuine trauma or adversity. Consider a case featured in Psychology Today about Tom, a successful lawyer whose accomplishments were continually undermined by an unrelenting inner critic shaped by childhood trauma. Despite external markers of success, he coped daily with persistent shame and the belief that he would never be good enough. Through intensive therapy focused on identifying the origins of his critical voice, practicing self compassion techniques, and gradually building evidence based counter narratives about his capabilities, Tom experienced significant change. The intensity and frequency of his inner criticism decreased dramatically over time. He reported higher job satisfaction and improved relationships both at work and home. Tom eventually became known as a mentor who helps others challenge similar patterns while advancing diversity initiatives at his firm. While Tom's demographic differs somewhat from the primary focus of Sharon's work with Black professionals, his story powerfully illustrates universal principles behind overcoming inherited and internalized limitations, a core theme in her research. What these three examples collectively demonstrate is something Sharon emphasized repeatedly in our conversation. The path to authentic success requires us to become conscious of the unconscious narratives driving our decisions and behaviors. Most people, Sharon told me, spend their entire careers trying to change external circumstances while never addressing the internal stories that created those circumstances in the first place. This insight is particularly crucial for those navigating predominantly white or male dominated environments, where external messages may constantly reinforce limiting beliefs about what's possible. But here's the liberating truth Sharon wants everyone to understand. You can rewrite your story. You can challenge those limiting beliefs. You can develop the emotional agility to recognize when old narratives are hijacking your potential. And when you do, you don't just change how you feel, you change what you achieve. So, what does this mean for you right now today? I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine what would happen if for just one day, you silence that critical voice. If you approach every meeting, every conversation, every decision from a place of inherent worthiness instead of doubt, what would change? What might you say that you've been holding back? What might you attempt that you've been avoiding? The stories we tell ourselves are not just abstract concepts, they are the invisible architecture of our lives. They determine whether we raise our hand or stay silent, whether we apply for that position or tell ourselves, maybe next time, whether we own our expertise or downplay our contributions. Today, I challenge you to become the author of your own story, not the version handed to you by others, not the narrative built on outdated messages or painful experiences, but the authentic story of who you truly are and what you're truly capable of. Take 5 minutes, just 5 minutes for radical honesty about what story you're telling yourself that might be holding you back from stepping fully into your power. Write it down without judgment. Then ask yourself, is this really true? Or is it just something I inherited along the way? Because here's what Sharon's work ultimately reveals: the most powerful story in your life is the one you choose to believe about yourself. And when you choose a story of possibility rather than limitation, when you choose a narrative of growth rather than fixed capacity, when you choose to see yourself as the author rather than the character in someone else's plot, everything changes in a world that will try to write your story for you. Your job, your sacred responsibility is to pick up the pen and write it yourself. Your story is waiting. The question is, what will you write?